This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody. It is Lenny Murphy here with another one of our interview series, and today is a very, very special one. We're talking to friends and family. We are talking to the man, the myth, the legend, Larry Friedman, PhD, a long and storied career, and to top it all off, over the last few years, has been the editor of GreenBook Blog. Hello, Larry.
Well, Lenny, always a pleasure.
It is. We probably talk too often for that to really be considered pleasure. But we wanted to take this opportunity to talk because you have an important announcement that we wanted to share with everybody. I'll let you make that.
Okay. Well, life is a big relay race. It's one of the things I've come to realize, and after a while, and you get to run your leg. You take the baton from somebody else, and then you run your leg, and then you hand it off to somebody else, and then you go off and get a drink or something like that. And 4.5 years ago, I handed off the baton on my full-time career. I'd spent many years, nearly 40 years in the market research business. Handed off the baton when I was the Chief Research Officer at TNS and moved into, what I thought was going to be a retired phase. But as Michael Corleone said in Godfather 3, every time I try to get out of it, they just keep pulling me back in. So friends like you and some other folks, called me up and asked me to help out. So for the last, among other things, I've been doing some consulting for friends, and I've been doing editing of the GreenBook blog for the last couple of years. And I've decided that, as I said, life is a relay race. It's time to sort of pass the baton on the GreenBook blog. So as of the first of the year, I have handed the baton, I guess, back to you, Lenny, and I'm off to get another drink.
Yeah, I should have said no givebacks when I handed it to you the first time, Larry. But yeah,
that's why negotiation is just such a critical skill.
Right. And to top it all off, so you are retiring as the editor of GreenBook Blog. Although I still think we'll tag on an editor emeritus or some type of title.
There you go, something like that.
But now I got to be nice to you because you're still taking another role.
Yes, I was very happy. Łukasz Paszwakal, who heads up GreenBook, and Lenny asked me to become part of the GreenBook board. So now I will still be involved. Everybody will now have to actually pay attention, to what I'm saying, and pretend that they're interested in it and things like that. So I'll still be involved with that. I'm still doing some consulting, with some of my other friends, but stepping back a bit. It's time to do that. My wife is finally giving up, her job as well full time. So now we get to sit in the living room and kind of stare at each other. We're big.
That's great. But also now knowing it over the years, but you also like to drive Corvettes and drink wine. So hopefully those two things will help offset.
Yes. Let me just add though, not at the same time. And actually, I've got this little sign on my desk. Let me see if I can actually show it. I don't know if you could see it, or if it's backwards, but it says, "Drink wine, read books, be happy." And that's kind of summarizes a lot of what I plan to be doing.
Well earned. And, officially, let me say that you have been instrumental in helping the GreenBook blog to grow, to become even better than it was, to add a lot of structure to what was inherently a kind of a chaotic process. And I certainly do not think that I will fill your shoes in any way, shape, or form. But I appreciate everything that I've learned from you over the years in helping us just be better than we ever were. So
well, thank you. It's been a really good time. I've really enjoyed doing it. First of all, GreenBook, and everything that it's been involved with, from the blog to IIEX and the various webinars and other activities, I think has really been at the forefront of something that has meant a lot to me for many years now, which is change in the market research industry. and really trying to adapt to a new digital world, um, and just something that could be much bigger than it has been historically. So it's been a lot of fun to work with authors. The most rewarding thing, I was thinking about this over the last few weeks, that if I was going to try to pin down something that was most rewarding about the experience, were the emails I would get from authors, thanking me for helping them make the article much better than it was when they first sent it to me. Because I took my role very seriously and made authors think harder than they had them before about what they were trying to say. I mean, I always felt that I didn't need to agree with authors, and there were plenty of times I disagreed. But it was my role to help them express themselves as best as they could. So I took a lot of satisfaction in that. And yes, from what you and the others tell me, readership is up. The blog is in good shape. It's scary for me to think of that I could actually help add structure to anything, because anybody who's known me over the course of my career would know that structure has generally not been my friend. But I'm glad to have helped. It's been a great experience.
You've done a great job, and we appreciate it. We're glad that in this case that you cannot escape the gravity well of GreenBook, no matter how much you may want to. But I think back to when we first met. Gosh, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I think it was either at ARF or maybe the old AMA research conference. And you and I just chatting about the changes happening in the industry at that point. And that was always one of the things that impressed me about you, especially in your role as Research Officer of TNS, that you were bravely looking at the future and not afraid to call out that the industry was transforming, and that many of the organizations that that the industry had been built up and were the leaders were not necessarily doing a great job of driving that transformation. So that fearlessness and intellectual honesty on your part is certainly something I always respected. And I think that's a great. What I'm trying to get to is now a kind of a slight switch in topic of thinking about your career, because you've been in the industry forever, right? So.
Well, as I like to say, when I first started in market research, I was 6'2" and blonde. Look what it's done to me.
It's shrunk you down. But think about that, from a kind of a retrospective standpoint. That you did start in the industry really in it's not its infancy, but in the early days before it became as prominent as it is now, and the changes that you've seen overall. Where would you say that the industry is today in terms of the level of change versus other periods of upheaval that have occurred in the past?
Well, I mean, there's been in some areas there's been a huge amount of change. In others, not so much, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I've been thinking a lot about it lately. I mean, one of the things. Okay, when I entered the industry in like 1980, roughly, what would be difficult for people who entered the industry in the last few years would be to understand is how much of it was handmade. It was really a craft. To do a survey project required thousands of hand steps. I mean, this was before PCs. I mean, there were like 3 companies I worked for where I bought their first PC. And what had just entered into use, and not really widespread use, were standalone word processing machines operated by specially trained operators. So if you were a project director tasked with getting a project out the door, you did everything by hand. You wrote out questionnaires on long yellow pads, and handed it off to get typed, and had to proof it, and had to wait for all those things to happen and get the corrections made. And then you had to FedEx it to a client because there was no email. And then everything that happened after, all the versions of questionnaires, the cards you had to show respondents if you were doing a mall interview. I mean, and then afterwards, to get tabulations done for based on a 1960s model of, computing time is expensive, so you use it as little as possible, and we charge you an arm and a leg for everything you want to do. To then writing reports by hand and getting them, done and edited and all that. So a project would last 8 weeks. You still got maybe a day to analyze it
Right.
and really try to figure out what it meant out of that 8 week process. So it was a handcrafted business, and there were thousands of ways mistakes could be made and were made. So that is all different now. So when we talk about change in the industry, especially the incredible changes over the last 5 years, I mean, it's been changing gradually over time as PCs and the programs to do word processing and spreadsheets and all that became ubiquitous. A lot of those hand steps, kind of gradually went away. But we're now at a point where you pretty much don't need people to execute a project. There's very little human impact, that's needed. There's still the half a day or the day you get to analyze and figure out what it means. So that part of it has actually changed much less over the course of my career.
The deliverables, the deadline.
I mean, now, projects will get done in a few days, right, but you still only get a few hours or a day to really try to figure out what it means. And that's really where there's been very little change, as best as I can see. I mean, I remember when I started my career at General Foods, which no longer exists, but then was Market Research University in many ways. We were taught that there had to be research conclusions written at the beginning of a report. I mean, the reports could be 50 pages, which we no longer do. But there was a page of research conclusions, and there was a page of marketing implications. And that part of it's not changed. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I found surprising over the course of my career is how little attention market researchers paid to the marketing implications.
Yeah.
And that's still the big challenge, as far as I can see, for the industry. You and I have talked about this. We've written about it. We've seen it in Grit, that there have been two major trends over the last few years in the market research business. One is the rapid change in technology and what that's done, and the platforms that have been created. But there's also been a sort of parallel move to strategic consulting, as more companies try to take that on to sort of differentiate themselves. And the need for action, as I was presenting a lot about, I guess about 5-6 years ago, about the need to more to closely connect action to what market researchers have done. The reality is that there's still not nearly enough that's been done in that direction. There are still very few market researchers, I feel, who are comfortable standing up in front of a board and saying, here's what the research has said. Now here's what it means we should do. We need to take this action. We need to spend more here. We need to spend less there. We need to be focusing more on these people, less on these others. And actually saying, in a predictive sense, if we don't do these things, our business will go down by X amount. If we do, then our business could go up by Y amount. There's not nearly enough of that done. And that is really where I feel the industry ultimately is going to trip up, because of its relative inability to do that. I remember I once gave a presentation at an SMR conference about 15 years ago, I guess it must have been. And it was about some R&D I was working on at the time. And it was about the automotive category. It was something that we funded ourselves. And I didn't shared with any clients in advance. And I remember saying, as a result of what we had, that if I was Toyota, I would be focusing here. If I was Nissan, I would be focusing there. And, these are the kinds of things I would be doing. And then after the presentation was over, during one of the breaks, somebody who worked for one of the major research companies, especially in automotive, came up to me and was saying, we would never say things like that to our clients. We just, give them the results. We would never, say you need to go, do this. And to me, that just sort of summarized a lot of what has always kind of concerned me about the industry, and still does. Because while certainly, yes, we can get projects done now in 3 days or 2 days or overnight if need be. And the industry is always struggling to find ways to do things like that. But still, what does it mean? There are two basic questions in market research. That market research is about. If I could sort of distill everything that the entire industry does into two questions. One is, how am I doing? And the second question is, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
And researchers, I think, feel reasonably comfortable with trying to answer the first question. They'll say, our metric is X and that's above the norm, or it's Y and it's below the norm. This other metric, we're number one in the category. This other metric, we're number 5, or whatever it is. So you can sort of get a picture of how they're doing. But then, the question about, okay, well, now what do I do about it, is still a big question that consultants, true consultants, feel much more comfortable with than market researchers.
Yep.
But unless researchers, or whatever we want to call ourselves these days, start to do that on a more regular basis, if that's not baked in to what the industry does, well, it's going to be other people who ultimately really take over the space.
Yep.
Because one of the things that platforms, the Qualtrics of the world, the Delvinias, all those, Zappies, all these people who've done such an incredible job of relieving the lives of project directors and stopping them from having to worry about millions of details anymore, and being able to do it fast and accurately. They still, researchers still don't do anything different about getting insights than they did, years ago, or really then drawing action. I mean, some of the methodologies are certainly better. Some of the statistical techniques have advanced. There's been some additional thinking that's gone on in terms of, behavioral science that's had some impact. But the ability to draw real marketing implications, as we called it back in, my first days at General Foods, that's still, kind of an art. And there are very few artists in market research.
Yeah. Yeah. So, preach to the choir. Obviously, one of the reasons why we hooked up over the years to be bringing the
Sure.
Green Book, that same perspective, and I think we've proven your points within Grit, or the Market Leader Report, which you've also been instrumental in over the past few years. We've shown that. We've shown through the data, companies that do these things are experiencing growth. Companies that do not do these things are not experiencing as much growth, both on the client side and the supplier side.
That's right.
And it's interesting thing.
That's why it's nice that, I mean, there are, shoots coming out of the ground, on that. You can see how there are companies, whether it's an LRW or whether it's an engine, and some others that are trying to bake action of some sort into what it is they produce for a client.
But they do that now, and totally agree with you. I think that the tension is that those companies, the way they're achieving that is through bringing down the walls between marketing and research.
That's right.
Organizationally. You and I coined two terms for that a year or so ago, kind of the full stack technology driven companies versus the kind of full cycle marketing uh, uh, organizations, and I think that makes a lot of traditional research folks really uncomfortable.
That's right.
And right, right, we've always had that wall there. This was data, and what you guys do with it, so we wouldn't be biased. Is not connected. But the real efficiency seems to be when we are connected, and when it is we maybe it's the tail wagging the dog, but the dog is still moving, and
Yeah, and but there's an interesting challenge with all this, and I think you and I have talked about this before as well, which is that how do you make money?
yeah,
And right now, the way to make money is to get investments to develop a platform and run that platform as hard and as fast as you can. And that will get you a big valuation, which will please the people who have invested in your company, and will please people who potentially might want to buy your company. The consulting side sort of holds back that valuation.
yeah,
So you're kind of stuck there with how do you make that platform really valuable to clients, and that's by showing them what they can do with it and what they can learn and how it can affect their business, and not wanting to do it too much because then you've got to invest in a lot of people resources, which drags down your valuation.
yeah,
So there's a real conundrum for companies that are in it. And I think we were like half joking, a couple of months ago talking about it, and that there are companies who kind of hide how much consulting they really do.
yeah. They'll remain nameless, but we have a pretty good idea of who you are. Managed services is still services.
That's right. That's right. And one of the things that I have consulted with, on my own, with some companies who have incredible platforms, just incredible. But what I've tried to convince them of is that unless their clients, their end clients, can understand what they can do with the platform and the incredible value that they can get, whether it's from an insight perspective or a more direct connection to action, you're going to undervalue ultimately what your business is going to be.
The interesting on
What
that
if you
is,
build a platform and no one comes?
right. So let's use LRW as an example, right? Since they're public, what they're doing and all of their acquisitions. As the way that those companies are getting past that consulting, uh, the wall of valuation from a consulting standpoint is through that overlay of the marketing services and
Yep.
that activation component, right?
Yep.
Because that is scalable. So it's kind of this merger of martech and ad tech and research tech with this consulting overlay. But what drives the value is the scalability of the activation component. Right? That's how they're getting past that piece. And I think the same thing with the platforms that we joke about the managed services, but the reality is managed services is a contract, and everybody likes annual contracts, and that can be sourced out to overseas if needed, and prices can drop, and it's recurring revenue, right? They're removing the ad hoc component, and that's really the core driver. It's licensing revenue. So what does that mean for you were part of Kantar as Chief Research Officer at TNS. They're obviously transforming as a business, and you were privy to that as they've gone down this path over the past few years. What does it mean for a company like Kantar or Ipsos or GfK? And we see them trying to straddle the lines here. What do you think they look like 2-3 years from now?
Well, I think that, the smart move has been to try to develop their own platforms and through that, ultimately, they can suck out a lot of that kind of intermediary cost of managing projects for clients. Um, so they're gonna. I mean, I feel it's not just a Cantor thing, and certainly I've been out now for 4.5 years, so I'm not privy to any particular details of anything that they're doing. As the old saying goes, I just know what I read in the papers. Um, but from what you could see publicly and from conversations with various people, whether you're talking about in Ipsos, you're talking about a Cantor, you're talking about GFK, or any of the more traditional majors, it's going to move more into the platform space. I think it's going to move more into connecting different kinds of data. I mean, I think that's an opportunity that they have. And when I say they, I mean Ipsos has a lot of this as well. I mean, they bought Synthesio, so there's a social media component. Um, this ability or potential ability to do what I used to call programs. I mean, when I was giving speeches about this, 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking about the move from projects to programs. And inherently part of that is taking different kinds of information and pulling them together and then making predictions off of that about what a client's business direction was going to be. And the answer to the second question that I posed before, what do we do about it? So I think they're going to ultimately move much more closely in that direction. I think this is where, I mean, if I was going to guess, I mean, part of the reason for WPP to retain a significant part of Cantor is so that it can ultimately enable them to connect insights, all this other stuff that Cantor can move into more closely into the marketing action that they can get through the agencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that may ultimately be part of the play, but I think it's where everybody needs to move into, is to really move more strongly in that direction. To be another, survey platform, I'm not sure if that's going to be a huge business for them. There will be a business for them, but it certainly will be difficult to dominate in that way because platforms are becoming ubiquitous.
Yeah.
There are a variety of just pure platforms that you can engage with on a reasonably global basis. The network that was or is, Cantor or Ipsos is going to be less of an advantage for that, as we move forward. So the platform becomes kind of the cost of doing business. You can't afford the old way anymore because you've got these new platforms that can do it so much more quickly, so much more cheaply, that you can't really compete with that. So you've got to do that almost as a cost of business. What the big question is can they really do that more upscale, consulting in a convincing way and get people to pay for it?
Yeah. Well,
And,
sage advice, my friend. I want to be cautious of time because retirement beckons, right? So I'm sure that stack of books, there's some that you really want to get to read back there behind. Um, so what does the future hold for you now? Right? Tell me about just the next couple of years and kind of the role you envision for yourself.
well, there is the driving the Corvette, there's walking on the beach, playing with my grandson, all that. Um, there's all those kinds of life kinds of things that I've grown to enjoy and look forward to doing a little bit more. Still planning to keep my hand in a bit. I don't want to work quite as much as I was, but you kind of have to like look in the mirror and realize who you are. And I'm a researcher. I mean, I went into market research because I felt applied social psychology. And that's what I had gotten my PhD in, and I needed a job. And, it's I'll be very honest about it. I needed a job. My wife was pregnant, and it just seemed to me, time to go get a job. So I'm a researcher. I mean, I am inherently curious about why things work, why people do the things they do. So that doesn't turn off at 5 p.m. It didn't start at 9 a.m. I am always interested in that and always will be interested in that. So I anticipate still doing some consulting for friends. I'll still do some writing. Um, still have a couple of articles in the back of my head I'd like to write. So there'll be, some of those things. Like I said, I have friends who call me up and ask for my help on things, so I'm happy to help them.
Well,
I may show up at IIEX every once in a while and ask hard questions, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is that now I am completely unencumbered.
That's right.
I can only embarrass myself. I can't embarrass my company. So I can call baloney out when I see it. And there's certainly more than a few sandwiches that can be made by what I see. So yes, I will show up and ask hard questions. And there's certainly a lot that can be done. So I'll be around. I'll be around. I'll be haunting some people's dreams.
Well, we wouldn't have it any other way. So, Larry, thank you for everything. Truly, your entire career, all that you've contributed to the industry, specifically what you have contributed so far to GreenBook and to me personally, is one of my mentors, honestly. And what you'll continue to contribute now now that you're unencumbered. We gotta watch out. I mean, you may really call bullshit on things now. So.
Well, yeah, and I want to thank you. I mean, this has been a great opportunity for me to be editor and to participate in some of that change. And like I said, get people to think a little bit harder about some of the points they wanted to make. It's been fun. I am grateful to you and to Lukash for the opportunity, and to the entire GreenBook team, who worked very hard on the blog. Worked very hard on the conferences and the webinars and all the publications and all that goes into it. It's a great group, and it's been real. So thank you.
Well, thank you, my friend. So enjoy the wine, enjoy the Corvette, not at the same time, and enjoy staring at your beautiful wife when in between.
I will.
Thank
Okay.
you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Okay, bye.